The spirit world's law of silence, Cayce's forbidden teaching. You've felt it, that moment after someone dies when the silence becomes deafening. You reach out to them, you pray, you wait for a sign, but nothing comes. And in that nothing, questions begin to circle like birds in a darkening sky. Are they gone? Did they forget me? Was it all just nothing? You sit in the quiet of your room, or you walk through a place they loved, and you whisper their name into the air. You ask the universe, God, the void, anyone, to give you something, a feather, a song on the radio, a dream that feels more real than real. But the silence holds, and that silence, it can feel like abandonment. But what if it isn't? What if that silence isn't cruelty or indifference or proof that there's nothing beyond this world? What if the silence is, in fact, the most loving law the universe ever wrote? What if restraint, spiritual restraint, is the deepest form of care? Today, we're going to explore a teaching that most people never hear about. Not because it's hidden in some dusty archive, but because it's so radical, so counterintuitive, that even those who know it struggle to speak it aloud. This teaching comes from Edgar Cayce, America's so-called sleeping prophet, a man who spent decades in trance states delivering thousands of readings about the soul, the afterlife, karma, and the structure of spiritual reality. And buried in those readings is a pattern, a law, a principle so fundamental that once you see it, you can't unsee it. It changes how you grieve, how you pray, how you honor the people you've loved and lost. It changes how you understand your own life right now, in this moment, because the silence you feel. It isn't proof that no one is listening. It's proof that someone loves you enough not to interfere. The question we're answering today is this: why does the spiritual realm seem so quiet? And the answer, the one Cayce kept returning to, life after life, reading after reading, is both terrifying and beautiful. Because the deepest act of love, it turns out, is sometimes restraint. And the silence, it's not the end of the conversation, it's the space where you learn to hear. Before we go any further, let's talk about the man who mapped this territory. Edgar Cayce was born in 1877 in Kentucky. He was a photographer by trade, a Sunday school teacher by habit, and by accident or destiny, he became one of the most documented psychics in American history. Over the course of his life, Cayce gave more than 14,000 readings. Not performances, not guesses. Readings, documented, transcribed, archived sessions where he would lie down, enter a trance state, and speak. Sometimes he spoke about someone's health, sometimes about their past lives, sometimes about the nature of reality itself. And here's what matters. His readings were consistent. Across decades, across thousands of sessions, patterns emerged. The same principles about karma, about the soul's journey, about guides and the afterlife and memory, they appeared again and again, like threads in a vast, invisible tapestry. Cayce didn't claim to be special. He didn't ask to be worshipped or followed. In fact, he was deeply humble about his gift, often confused by what came through him. What he did claim was this: that all of us are capable of attunement, that the spiritual realm isn't locked away from ordinary people, that we all have access to guidance, to memory, to the divine, if we learn how to listen. Cayce was simply the first to map it on a grand scale. He was the cartographer of the unseen. And in his readings, one teaching kept surfacing, not loudly, not obviously, but like a bass note beneath a symphony. It hummed through everything he said. It's a teaching about silence, about why the veil exists, about why guides don't intervene the way we wish they would. It's a teaching about love operating within law. And once you understand it, the world and the worlds beyond this one begin to make sense in a way they never did before. So let's begin, not with answers, not yet, but with the frame. The veil. The question that haunts every grieving heart and every seeking soul. Why can't I reach them? There is a membrane, not a wall, not a punishment, a membrane. Between this world, the one you can touch and taste and see, and the realm where consciousness continues, there exists something mystics have called the veil. You can't see it, you can't measure it, but you feel it. Every time you sense a presence but can't prove it. Every time you have a dream that feels like more than a dream. Every time you wonder if someone you loved is still somehow here, watching, waiting, hoping you'll notice. The veil is the boundary, the edge, the place where physical reality meets spiritual continuity. And here's what Edgar Cayce taught. The veil isn't punishment, it's design. It exists because choice requires separation, because free will, real, authentic, soul, deep free will, can only exist when you don't have all the answers. Imagine if you remembered everything, every past life, every choice your soul ever made, every consequence waiting in the wings. Imagine if your guides could speak to you directly, audibly, constantly. If they could show you the future, correct every mistake before you made it, guide your hand like a parent guiding a child's crayon. What would be left for you to choose? What would be yours? The veil exists so that your choices are real, so that your love is genuine, not coerced, so that your courage means something. And woven into that veil is a principle Cayce described across hundreds of readings. He didn't always name it explicitly, but the pattern was unmistakable. We can call it the law of silence. It's not that the dead are silent. It's not that guides don't care. It's that direct revelation is withheld, not out of cruelty, but out of respect. Respect for your agency. Respect for the journey your soul chose. Respect for the fact that you asked to come here, to this world of forgetting, because only here could you become what you came to become. And here's the paradox that breaks most people's hearts. Your guides are present, but they are also silent. They are near, but they do not shout. They love you, but they will not control you. And the question you're asking right now, why don't they help more, contains its own answer, because helping more would mean taking your power, your choices, your becoming, and that, according to Cayce's vision, would be the most unloving thing they could do. So the veil holds, the silence stretches, and you are left to navigate this world with intuition, with trust, with the faint whispers of guidance that never quite remove the mystery, because the mystery is the point, and you're already walking in it. Right now, in this moment, you are living inside the law of silence. You might not have named it, you might not have understood it, but you felt it. That awareness of presence without proof, that intuition without certainty, that love you carry for someone who isn't here anymore, love that doesn't fade, even though you can't hold them. This is the threshold. This is the exact space where the law operates. And the reason most people don't recognize it is because they're waiting for something louder, something undeniable, a voice, a vision, a miracle that removes all doubt. But the law doesn't work that way. According to Cayce's readings, your life, this ordinary, messy, uncertain life, is the testing ground. Every day you're choosing, not consciously maybe, not dramatically, but in small, quiet ways, you're choosing between faith and control, between surrender and grasping, between trusting the whisper and demanding the shout. And here's where it gets uncomfortable. When you demand proof from the spiritual realm, when you say, "Give me a sign and make it obvious," what you're really asking is for the universe to break the law, to break the structure, to override your free will, to take away the very conditions that allow your soul to grow. And the universe, in its infinite love, refuses, not because it doesn't care, but because caring means letting you choose. Think about it. When have you grown the most? When everything was easy? When every answer was handed to you? When you never had to sit in uncertainty or trust without guarantees? Or did you grow in the moments when you didn't know? When you had to choose love even though it hurt? When you had to keep going even though you couldn't see the path ahead? The law of silence is mercy disguised as mystery, and the threshold, this moment right now, is where you learn to live with it. Notice how you feel when you can't control something, when a loved one doesn't answer, when the universe doesn't comply with your timeline. That feeling, that restlessness, that grief, that frustration, that's where the law teaches, not by giving you answers, but by inviting you to trust anyway. And that trust, slow, uncertain, built in the dark, is what transforms a soul. So if guides aren't shouting, how do they speak? If the veil holds, how does love move through it? This is where Cayce's teachings become both practical and poetic. Because according to the readings, guidance doesn't work the way we think it does. Guides don't move your hand. They don't write messages in the sky or whisper directly into your ear, at least not often, not obviously. Instead, they communicate through resonance, through thought, through intuition, through synchronicity, through dreams, through the words of a stranger at exactly the right moment, through the book that falls open to the page you needed, through the song that plays when you're about to give up, through the friend who texts you out of nowhere with exactly what your heart needed to hear. These aren't coincidences, they are courtesy, the courtesy of love that operates within law, love that honors your agency even as it reaches toward you. And here's the test. Can you recognize love that doesn't grab you by the shoulders? Can you trust a whisper? Most of us can't, at least not at first. We're trained to value the loud, the certain, the undeniable. We're taught that if it's not obvious, it's not real. But the spiritual realm works in the opposite direction. It values the subtle, the gentle, the easily missed. Because recognizing the subtle requires your participation. It requires you to pay attention, to develop discernment, to trust your inner knowing even when the outer world offers no proof. And why the restraint? Why not just make it easier? Because if guides intervened directly, constantly, obviously, you'd become dependent. You'd stop trusting yourself. You'd stop growing. You'd become like a child who never learns to walk because someone always carries them. Your soul chose this earth life specifically to develop those capacities: discernment, trust, the ability to hear the quiet voice beneath the noise. And every time you dismiss a whisper as just your imagination, you're not failing, you're learning. Every time you follow a hunch and it leads nowhere, you're not being tricked. You're practicing, because guidance isn't about getting it right every time. It's about learning to listen. And if you're struggling to hear, if you're ashamed that you can't feel your guides the way you think you should, you're not being punished. You're being honored with the chance to grow. The mirrors are there. The signs are there. But they're waiting for you to see, not with your eyes, with your soul. Let's go deeper, because if guides are operating within the law of silence, if they can't intervene directly, then how exactly do they reach us? Cayce spoke about this across dozens of readings, and a map emerged, a map of spiritual communication. 4 primary channels, 4 ways that love speaks through the veil. First, dreams. This is the most direct channel. When you sleep, your conscious mind steps aside, the veil thins, and in that liminal space, guides can reach you with images, symbols, conversations that feel realer than waking life. If you've ever woken from a dream and felt like you'd been somewhere, like you'd touched something true, that wasn't your imagination, that was communication. But here's the catch. A dream you ignore teaches you less than a dream you journal. A message you dismiss is invisible. Dreams require your participation, your attention, your willingness to ask, what was that trying to tell me? Second, intuition. This is the most frequent channel, that gut feeling, that sudden knowing, that sense of, I should call this person, or I shouldn't take that road, or this choice feels right even though I can't explain why. Intuition is the language your soul speaks, and your guides speak through your intuition like a radio signal tuning into a frequency you already have access to. But again, it requires trust. It requires you to act on the whisper before you have proof, and that's the practice. That's the discipline. Third, synchronicity. This is the most undeniable channel, at least when you're paying attention, the number that keeps appearing. The name you've been thinking about that suddenly shows up in a book, a conversation, a street sign. The coincidence that's too precise to be random. Carl Jung called it synchronicity. Cayce called it spiritual law in motion. Your guides can't make you see these patterns, but they can arrange circumstances. They can move pieces on the board in ways that create intersections, overlaps, moments of alignment. And when you notice, when you stop and say, wait, that's the third time this week, you're not imagining it. You're seeing the architecture of guidance. Fourth, energy, felt sense. This is the most subtle channel, the sudden warmth in a room, the feeling of being watched, but not in a creepy way, in a comforting way. The sense that someone you loved is near, even though you can't see them. The pressure of a hand on your shoulder when no one is there. This is presence, raw, unfiltered presence, and it's easy to dismiss, easy to write off as wishful thinking or grief playing tricks. But Cayce taught that this is real, that souls who've crossed over can make themselves felt within the boundaries of the law. They can't speak, but they can be. And if you're still enough, quiet enough, open enough, you'll feel it. Now, here's the deeper mystery. What if the person you're about to meet isn't random? What if the opportunity that's about to present itself isn't luck? What if it's timed exactly? What if your guides have been arranging the pieces for weeks, months, years, waiting for the moment when you're ready to receive what they've been trying to give? Guides can't make you see. They can't force you to hear. But they can arrange circumstances, they can create conditions, they can place mirrors in your path and hope you'll look. This is love operating within law, and understanding this changes everything. It changes how you grieve, how you listen, how you move through the world, because once you know the language, you start to hear it everywhere. Now we arrive at one of Cayce's most profound teachings, and it's going to stretch your understanding of memory, identity, and why the veil exists in the first place. Cayce spoke often about something he called the Akashic Records, not a physical place, not a library you can visit, but a non-physical field, an energetic archive where everything is recorded, every choice your soul has ever made, every lifetime, every relationship, every consequence, every lesson learned and lesson still unfolding. It's all there, known, held, witnessed. In the spiritual realms, according to Cayce's readings, souls have access to this field. They can review their lives. They can see the patterns. They can understand the why behind the pain, the purpose behind the struggle. But here, in physical form, the records are hidden, not erased, hidden. And here's the paradox that stops most people in their tracks. Everything is recorded and knowable in the spiritual realms, but hidden from you in physical form. Why? Because access to your full history would overwhelm your psyche. It would paralyze your present choices. It would rob you of the very thing you came here to develop, the ability to choose freely without the weight of knowing every consequence. Imagine if you remembered every mistake you'd ever made across multiple lifetimes, every person you'd hurt, every opportunity you'd wasted. How would you move forward? How would you forgive yourself? How would you trust yourself to choose again? Or imagine if you knew exactly why you're drawn to a certain person, a certain place, a certain calling. If you knew it was karma from 3 lifetimes ago, would you still choose it freely? Or would you choose it out of obligation? The law of silence protects your agency. It gives you the mercy of not remembering everything at once. But, and this is critical, you do retain patterns. Cayce taught that across lifetimes the soul carries forward what he called soul memory, not conscious memory, not facts or names or dates, but patterns, talents you didn't learn in this life but somehow know, fears that have no origin in your current experience but feel ancient, attractions and repulsions that make no logical sense but feel undeniable. This is soul memory. It's the law of silence, honoring what you need to know while protecting you from what would crush you. And it shows up in your life as intuition, as resonance, as that strange feeling of recognition when you meet someone for the first time, but feel like you've known them forever. Why do you feel drawn to certain people or places? Why do some things feel known, even though you've never learned them? That's the law at work, giving you access to your history, but in a form you can handle, in a form that invites you to explore rather than forcing you to confront. You're not forgotten in death. You're not erased. You're simply given the mercy of discovering yourself one layer at a time. And that discovery, that slow, uncertain, sometimes painful unfolding, that's the learning ground. That's why you're here. So what happens when you die? When the veil lifts, when the silence breaks? Cayce spoke about this with remarkable consistency, and what he described is both comforting and heartbreaking, because when you die, you do remember. The veil doesn't exist on the other side. The law of silence doesn't apply in the spiritual realms. When your consciousness leaves the physical body, recognition is immediate, profound, total. Souls you loved recognize you. You recognize them. The confusion ends. The separation dissolves. Your guides appear not as strangers, but as familiar presences you've known across lifetimes, friends, teachers, family in the truest sense. And the silence, it shatters into reunion. But here's the twist, the layer most people miss. That recognition happens in the spiritual realm, not in physical life. And that's why trying to prove contact here in this world can be so painful, because the rules are different. The law still holds. Your loved ones can't speak to you the way they could if you were on the other side with them. They can't remove the veil from their end. They can't override the structure. They can whisper. They can arrange signs. They can show up in dreams, in synchronicities, in the felt sense of presence. But they can't give you the proof you're desperate for, not because they don't want to, but because the law they helped create, the law all souls agreed to before incarnation, forbids it. And here's the reframe that changes everything. The silence during life isn't rejection. It's a contract, a sacred agreement your soul made before you were born. You agreed to forget. You agreed to the veil. You agreed to navigate this world without constant reassurance from the other side. Why would any soul agree to that? Because every moment you trust without proof, every time you choose love without evidence, you're strengthening the very capacities you'll need when you cross over. You're becoming the kind of soul that can recognize love, that can hold love, that can be love even in the dark. And your loved ones on the other side, they're not suffering your absence the way you're suffering theirs. They're whole, they're aware, they're at peace. And they're witnessing your becoming, not with impatience, not with frustration, with patience, with pride, with the kind of love that says, I trust you to find your way. The silence isn't abandonment. It's the sound of someone holding space for you to grow. Now we arrive at the most profound layer, the layer that answers the question every soul asks at some point. Why did I come here? Because according to Cayce's readings, every incarnation involves a choice, not a punishment, not a random assignment, a choice. Before you were born, your soul looked at this world, this heavy, difficult, beautiful, painful world, and said, yes, I'll go, I'll forget, I'll return. And that choice involved a vow to limitation, a vow to not knowing, a vow to the veil. I will return to that world of separation. I will forget my guides. I will feel alone sometimes, and in that forgetting, I will become more fully myself. Why would any soul agree to this? Cayce gave 3 primary reasons, repeated across hundreds of readings. First, to heal something unresolved. Karma isn't punishment, it's pattern, it's unfinished business. It's the soul saying, I didn't get that right last time, I want to try again. And so you return, not to suffer, but to learn, to balance, to complete. Second, to grow in love, compassion, or courage. Some qualities can only be developed in conditions of limitation. You can't learn courage without fear. You can't learn compassion without witnessing suffering. You can't learn love without the risk of loss. And so you return, not because you're broken, but because you're becoming. Third, to serve others' growth. Sometimes a soul incarnates not primarily for its own lessons, but to help others learn theirs. To be the teacher, the mirror, the catalyst. To be the person who breaks someone's heart so they learn self-worth. To be the child who dies young so a parent learns to let go. To be the friend who betrays so someone learns discernment. This doesn't make the pain less real, but it gives it meaning, and meaning, Cayce taught, is what the soul craves more than comfort. So you make the vow, I will go, I will forget, I will learn. And the costs? They're real. Vulnerability, grief, confusion, the weight of choice without guarantees, the loneliness of not remembering why you're here or what you came to do. But the payoffs are equally real. Character, wisdom, genuine love, not enforced love, not programmed love, but the kind of love that chooses to stay even when it could leave. Authentic choice, the chance to become something you couldn't be anywhere else. And the law of silence, the veil, the forgetting, the restraint, is the structure that makes it all possible. The silence isn't punishment for past lives. It's not a test you're failing. It's the framework that makes this life real, that makes your choices true, that makes your becoming yours. And what you do with this knowing, how you choose, whom you love, what you build, matters immensely. Not just for this life, but for every life your soul will ever live. Because you're not just passing through, you're carving a shape, leaving a signature, creating a pattern that will echo forward. And that pattern begins now, in this moment, in this choice. The vow you made before birth is still active, and honoring it means living it, fully, courageously, with love. So now that you understand the law of silence, now that you see the veil, the vow, the love beneath the restraint, what do you do with it? How do you live with this knowing? This is where the teaching becomes practice, where philosophy becomes discipline, and Cayce, across his readings, offered a map. Not rules, not commandments, but principles, practices, ways of attuning to the guidance that's always present, even when it feels absent. Let's start with 3. First, the receptivity discipline. Every morning before the noise of the day begins, set an intention, not a demand, not a list of requests, just this: I am open, I am listening, I am willing to notice. And then, throughout the day, practice noticing the whispers, the intuition, the synchronicity, the dream from last night that felt strange but significant. Don't demand thunder. Learn to trust the quiet. This is a discipline, a practice. Like learning a language. It takes time. You'll miss things. You'll dismiss signs. You'll doubt yourself. That's part of it. But slowly, over weeks and months, you'll start to recognize the texture of guidance, the feeling of resonance versus the feeling of fear, the difference between intuition and wishful thinking. And the more you practice, the clearer the signal becomes. Second, trust micro moments. Every day you're given tiny opportunities to act on faith without proof. Following a hunch to reach out to someone, saying yes to an invitation even though you're tired, taking a different route home for no reason you can articulate. These are the micro moments, the small acts of trust, and they matter more than you know. Because each time you follow the whisper, each time you act on intuition without needing to see the outcome first, you're strengthening your attunement. You're telling your soul and your guides, I trust this process. And the universe, in response, gives you more to trust. It's not magic, it's resonance. It's the law of silence responding to your willingness to participate. Third, love as the attunement. This is the core, the center, the secret Cayce kept returning to. Love is the frequency that opens spiritual channels. Not knowledge, not power, not perfection. Love, service, forgiveness, compassion. These aren't just nice things to do. They're forms of prayer. They're acts of attunement. Every time you choose kindness when you could choose judgment, you're aligning with the same frequency your guides operate on. Every time you forgive when you could hold a grudge, you're thinning the veil from your side. Every time you serve someone without needing recognition, you're saying to the spiritual realm, I understand. I'm here to give, not just to take. And that is what opens the doors, not because you've earned it, but because you've matched the frequency. Now, let's be real. This isn't always easy. There will be days when you feel nothing. Days when the whispers are drowned out by noise and doubt and grief, confusion, disappointment, loss. They're not signs the law is broken. They're not proof you're doing it wrong. They're evidence you're in it, learning, choosing, becoming. And on those days, the practice isn't about feeling guided. It's about trusting anyway. There's also a somatic component to this, a body practice, because presence isn't just a mental state. It's a felt state. Sit quietly, breathe slowly, feel the weight of your body, the air on your skin, the space around you, and then ask yourself, can I feel the presence of something loving, even without proof? Not as imagination, not as a trick, but as a willingness to allow the possibility. Sometimes in that allowing, something shifts, a warmth, a softness, a sense of being held. And sometimes nothing happens, but the practice remains the same. Trust the presence even when you can't feel it. This isn't about denying your pain. It's not about pretending everything is fine when it's not. It's about finding meaning in the pain, purpose in the uncertainty, and that meaning, it's the thread that guides you home. Let's pause here, because if you're listening to this, there's a good chance you're carrying someone who's gone, someone you miss, someone whose absence feels like a wound that won't close. And everything we've talked about, the law of silence, the veil, the restraint, might feel true in theory but unbearable in practice, because missing someone is real. The silence can feel suffocating. So let's sit with this. Let's honor the weight. The person you miss, they're not diminished by distance. They're not lost in confusion. They're not suffering on the other side, wondering why you can't reach them. According to Cayce's readings, they're whole. They're aware. They're at peace. And they can perceive your love. Not the way you want them to. Not with words and touch and shared meals. But they feel it. They know. Every time you think of them with love, every time you speak their name, every time their memory brings you to your knees in gratitude, that's not one-sided. That's communion. And here's the radical reversal. You can't reach them the way you want, but they can reach you. And they do. Through every moment of coincidence, every dream where they feel closer than they ever did in life, every time their favorite song plays at exactly the moment you need it. These aren't accidents. They're not your grief playing tricks. They're love moving through the veil, within the law, within the structure, within the restraint that protects your agency. Now, this doesn't make the pain less. It doesn't erase the longing, but it offers something else, something deeper, the knowledge that you're not abandoned, that love doesn't end, that the silence is temporary, and the reunion, the full, complete, undeniable reunion is waiting, and you're not abandoning them by accepting the silence. You're not betraying them by learning to live with it. You're honoring the law they chose, the law they helped write, the law that says, I trust you to grow, even without me holding your hand. So how do you grieve? Within this understanding, you speak to them anyway, not expecting an answer you can hear, but trusting they're listening. You journal to them. You meditate with their presence in mind. You do acts of service in their name, feeding the hungry, comforting the grieving, living the kind of life they'd be proud of. This is communion. This is connection, not the connection you want, but the connection the law allows. And on the other side, in the realm where they are now, there is no silence. There is no veil. There is only reunion. And every act of courage you make here, every moment you choose love despite the grief, is witnessed there, with pride, with joy, with the kind of love that says, I see you, I know you, and I'm waiting. You're not alone in this, even when the silence says you are. Now let's shift the lens. Let's imagine something together. Close your eyes, if you're able, or just soften your gaze, and imagine your older self, maybe 10 years from now, maybe at the end of this life, or imagine your soul after this life, free of the body, free of the veil. Looking back, what would that wiser self want you to know right now in this silence? According to Cayce's readings, your future self, the one who's crossed over, the one who's reviewed this life in the Akashic Records, looks back with compassion, not judgment. They see the struggles you couldn't understand, the pain that felt meaningless, the choices you second-guessed, and they understand. They see the why, the purpose, the pattern. And here's the message they'd send you, if they could. You're being tested not to punish you, but to forge you. Every moment you choose faith over fear. Every moment you choose love over control. Every moment you keep going, even though you can't see the path, you're becoming the person you'll be proud to be. Not perfect, not flawless, but real, honest, courageous in the ways that matter. And the acceptance that's really courage, it's this: letting go of needing proof, embracing trust, not blind trust, not naive trust, but the kind of trust that says, I don't understand this, but I'm willing to keep choosing love anyway. This is the deepest act the soul can perform, and it's lonely. It is. The veil can feel isolating. The law of silence can feel like exile, but that isolation, that's where courage lives. That's where you become.